Well, after a long weekend of the PTR being up and Dragonsoul being available, we learnt two things. The first thing we learnt is Friday, our raid team definitely shouldn't party together because it leads to people being a little bit poorly and not being able to raid on time on Saturday. And secondly, Dragonsoul is actually no joke. Now, while I know the skill level and even composition of each person's raid team will vary, which ultimately dramatically changes how difficult these encounters will be, I would say overall, as someone who's done a lot of raiding over the years, that I misremembered Dragonsoul. Like, very, very clearly misremembered Dragonsoul, because on 10-man heroic specifically, which is all I tested, I never stepped foot in 25-man, so I've got absolutely no idea on what the difficulty was like on 25-man, so this whole video, I'm just talking about 10-man heroic. I kind of don't remember 10-man heroic being quite this challenging, but I've got to be honest, I think the difficulty level and the challenge of the difficulty level is almost perfect. It kind of does encourage people to start getting their tier 13 sets maybe before attempting certain bosses on heroic, whereas we know ordinarily most semi-competent guilds will be able to go in and do a full clear, and gear is not normally an issue. Now, while this was just the first round of PTR and there absolutely could be adjustments made, there were certain bosses that were bugged completely, like Hagara, so if you managed to get Hagara heroic down, it was like the ice phase was just completely wrong. Even the phase 1 where you're just fighting the boss was completely wrong. So we didn't really bother taking that boss particularly seriously because really the only thing you could learn from it was the lightning phase. So I'm not going to talk about Hagara a great deal, but you might see a bit of footage of it throughout the video anyway. Now, I was streaming on and off Friday, Saturday and Sunday. In fact, Saturday I didn't stream at all. It was mainly just Friday and Sunday. And many people was coming into chat and saying, Warlord Zon'ozz is bugged. It's doing 25-man damage in 10-man. Now, I've got to admit, Warlord Zon'ozz is the boss that we spent the most amount of time in during the PTR, as in, I felt like we was being held hostage by him, to be honest, because we was having to fine-tune absolutely everything, change tactics almost on every pull, and just trying to really be able to get through the encounter. When people were saying it was doing 25-man damage in 10-man, it kind of made sense. I was like, oh, okay, so yeah, that's why it's that difficult. You know, it is really overtuned for 10 people. So I started looking at logs, and actually the damage difference between 25-man that the players were taking and 10-man that the players were taking, in some cases, different sources of damage, it was actually higher in 10-man. And I want to explain that that's not actually wrong. Now, the overall damage that goes out during the Black Blood phase, which is kind of when you let the big ball hit Zon'ozz, all the tentacles spawn, and the quicker you kill the tentacles, the lower the raid healing required becomes. The way that actually works is the damage is multiplied based on the amount of adds that are currently available. So because in 25-man you've got 14 adds, the AoE per add is actually lower. So for each add alive, it does around about 3.2k. So with all adds alive, the raid damage is about 45k that's going out at the time, every 2 seconds. Whereas in 10-man, actually, the damage per ad is 4.3k. So it should be like 34.4k with all ads alive, and that's every 2 seconds. On top of that, you have got random damage going round as well. And this is what confused me when I was looking at the logs. I was looking specifically at the eyes. Now, the eyes, on 10-man, we get 5 of them. On 25-man, you get 8 of these in total. They do a shadow gaze at random people, and you can actually interrupt it. It doesn't look like you can interrupt it because it hasn't got a cast bar, but you absolutely can. When it's upright, it's not casting. When it's sort of hunched over, you can interrupt it and then it will straighten back up again. Now, the damage that these eyes do with that shadow gaze is actually meant to be higher on 10-man and 25. So I was looking at 25-man logs where people are getting hit for about 18k. And then I'm looking at our personal logs and seeing we was getting hit for like 30k. And I'm thinking, man, this is completely wrong. How are we getting hit harder in 10-man? But it's actually right. And it actually kind of makes sense that it's like this, because obviously you are meant to be interrupting them. You don't want them just free casting. You've got to be able to get rid of the ads fast. And if you imagine 8, or let's even say 6 of those all randomly hitting the same player at the same time in 25-man, like there's no getting around that if they're doing 30k plus damage. Whereas in 10-man, because there's less, it kind of works out. You should never have 5 of these all doing 30k damage at the same time. So it seems weird, but 10-man heroic actually is perfectly normal that it's doing more damage than 25-man heroic, which kind of does seem crazy. And for you to see these numbers, all you need to do is look in the dungeon journal. Can't look at the dungeon journal on official servers though. So on any Kata private server where the dungeon journals are actually correct, and then you can compare that with Wowhead, which is exactly what I done. Because I was looking at it thinking, no, this is absolutely mental. So I went and looked at the actual spell IDs and looked at the spell ID effects that are in the Wowhead database and confirmed that even though the numbers are slightly different, it is actually the same. As in 10-man is, according to the Wowhead tooltips, doing more damage, and on 25-man, and these are legacy tooltips, by the way. I'm not talking about the ones that are now in the Cataclysm database. I'm talking about the ones that would have been used for Cataclysm originally. And obviously you can now look at the updated tooltips that are in the Cata database. So yeah, I feel like I should rewind back to the start, but I just wanted to talk about Zon'ozz first because I would say it was probably the one that maybe most people wiped so much that they switched to normal. Either that or we're bad, which I'm never going to claim that we're one of the best guilds in the world. You know what I mean? We're a group of friends that just enjoy raiding together. We raid together on many different servers and many different games as well, to be fair. But, you know, you all know you've got that guy that you could probably replace, but you won't because he's funny when he's drunk. I think that might be me. So yeah, I said rewind it back. Now, we only really looked at 4 bosses while we was in there. But we raided Friday for a few hours. We raided Saturday on and off because people's power went and stuff like that. We didn't get to raid quite the amount of hours that we actually wanted to due to unforeseen circumstances, but we still sunk a lot of time in. And yeah, I think people really have got a good challenge ahead of them. Obviously, I do want to hear from every single one of you in the comments. If you tested the PTR and you're like, nah, mate, you're making this sound harder than it is, you know, maybe your guild is exceptionally good, but please do let me know in the comments because for a while, we were starting to feel like, man, we're useless. Like, how are we struggling with this? You know, by the way, we're the sort of guild that goes in and does Firelands in about an hour. You know, we clear everything on Heroic normally in quite a timely manner. But some of these bosses kind of took us by surprise. But anyway, starting with like Morchok, if we was to have a think about Morchok, this is not really a difficult fight. There's a lot of damage going around, and really this is a healer fight. But you can make this really, really easy because the boss has got practically no health. We was like, why is he just falling over? Like, the fight really doesn't last long at all. It's just your healers have only got so much mana. So obviously the easy answer to this, if you've got a raid team that will allow it, is to just have 2 of your DPS go off-spec healer and then have 2 healers on each side, and that literally will make the fight face roll. Because basically what you do on this fight is you kind of split into 2 completely different raid teams. Obviously how we done it was 1 tank, 1 healer, 3 DPS. Ideally, you want it an even split. So you want 1 tank, 1 melee DPS, 2 range DPS, and then your healer. And basically, the healer's just got a lot of things to AoE heal, because you've got to stay in range of a stomp, you've got to soak a crystal, and you're just moving around a little bit. It's not really the most difficult fight in the world. It kind of feels like you're doing a dungeon boss, if I'm completely honest with you, because there is only 5 of you, and both groups of 5 are doing exactly the same thing on either side of the room. Well, it's not even a room because you're actually outdoors, but yeah. But the answer to just make this really, really easy, if your healer composition is a little bit weak, or maybe your healers might be just returning, you know, for Dragonsoul to get ready for MOP, so they're not in full Firelands gear, they're more in just like the catch-up dungeon raid gear, that sort of thing, then maybe you do need to 4-heal. But I truly believe 4-healing it will just make it completely face roll. Like, every single 10-man in the world should more or less be able to kill this boss if you was to 4-heal it. The only thing to be careful of is the tank, and plus the closest person to the tank, not the closest person to the boss, takes double the share of damage from the stomp. So when the stomp goes out, you will need to be within 25 yards. The only thing that can make being within 25 yards a bit difficult is when the crystal spawns, because you're ranged and your healer are going to want to go and soak the crystal. Your tank needs to be awake to keep the whole group within 25 yards. And then also, you want that plate wearer or high health or someone with a lot of cooldowns to obviously stand closest to the tank so they get double the share. I don't want to turn this into a guide, but just to give you some tips, maybe just in case you're about to start the PTR, maybe next weekend and then you see this video, at least it gives you a bit of an idea on how to approach the boss, because it's an easy entry sort of boss to a raid. Where it ramps up is Yorsage, which I kept saying Yorsage, and apparently everyone thought that was hilarious. What, I talk how I talk, sorry bruv. And then like Warlord Zon'ozz, Hagara, you know, you start going through, it does start to get more challenging. But Yorsage was a really interesting fight, other than the fact that it sucked for healers. And again, a lot of people was even saying some of the stuff like the oozes are doing 25 man damage on 10. They're not. Literally, again, if you look at the spell IDs, you look in the dungeon journal on any private server, the damage difference between 10 and 25, there is no difference. The orange slime that you let in and then it starts doing AoE bolts to the raid, like, that is exactly the same damage on 10 and 25. That's normal. So I think there was just a lot of 10-man groups that were really surprised with the incoming damage in this place. And we was, don't get me wrong. But there's just going to be a lot of the fights that need to be free-healed until we get that really over sort of inflated stat-wise gear. So like getting our 4 set where that almost gives every tank a raid cooldown. You know, getting our set bonuses that are obviously going to be really powerful. You know, there's going to be stuff that even from doing normal Dragonsoul and doing Raid Finder, getting those set bonuses, getting those big Dragonsoul trinkets, it's going to change it completely within like 2 weeks. So don't be scared that it feels hard now, because just enjoy the challenge. And yeah, as I say, Hagara's so bugged I don't even want to talk about it. I could go further than that and talk about Ultraxion and even Gunship 2.0. But it probably wouldn't be fair because I didn't do it with this raid team on the PTR. You know, it would be talking about other experience. So they're the 4 bosses that we actually saw. And yeah, other than the fact that Hagara is an absolute mess, and from my understanding and looking at logs, I think Spine was actually completely unkillable, as in you couldn't even get past it. I don't know what game-breaking bug it had on it, so you couldn't get any further in the raid, but again, we didn't even get to that. So, but I did notice when I looked at the logs, I couldn't see a single Spine or Madness killed. So yeah, I'm assuming there was just a bug where you just literally couldn't get any further than Spine. But we've got another weekend of PTR next weekend. We'll see if they do make any changes, maybe fix Hagara, like would be a good idea. But maybe they do scale down some of the damage on 10-man because they think it's going to be too difficult. I personally think it should stay as it is. Yes, it is difficult, but at the same time, it's heroic. Doing some of the bosses on normal the first week to get some gear, you know, try and get some 2 sets, 4 sets, and then, you know, start progressing on heroic in a more methodical manner rather than just expecting we should be able to do every one of these bosses on heroic, you know, straight away. Some guilds will, 100%, don't get me wrong, but obviously they're going to be really tight DPS checks, very composition reliant as well, you know, as in having the right classes is gonna go a long way. So, but look, that's just my thoughts on Dragonsoul. I'm not trying to scare you and say it's super difficult. Oh, you know, be aware. But at the same time, normally on these sort of videos, I'm like, man, it was face roll. You know, we just went in and we just zerged everything like it was a joke. This is probably the first one of these sort of videos where I'm like, do you know what? I weren't expecting that. But as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. If you need a Rested XP guide, there's affiliate links in the description and pinned comment. All that jazz. Lots of mop content coming. Obviously, my focus has shifted a little bit to Dragonsoul at the moment. Yep, we want to get it down ASAP so we can all get back to mop prep. But yeah, I'll see you on the next one.